Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Lew Dennen. This is EOXS, Stories on Steel. And today we are fortunate enough to have Neil Rasmussen. And you are truly very kind to join us today on podcast. I appreciate it. You've got you've got a cool background. It's very similar to mine, I think, but I think it's far more interesting, quite honestly. And I hope we can talk a little bit about that. And I'll ask you some questions. But if you don't mind, can I start right out by asking, what does your company do, sir?
We manufacture large diameter seamless steel pipes, and primarily in carbon steel and alloy steel.
Okay.
In sizes that traditionally have never been made here before. So it's quite going to be a historical facility, this one here, because we're going to be able to make up to 36-inch seamless pipe here in thin wall standards and stuff, which has never been done in the history of the United States. So it's kind of a cool event, and it's going to be monumental for the steel business, but it's also going to fill out the range that got vacated by some of the larger mills that were once here that just kind of disappeared due to, a bevy of reasons, right? So this will get a full range of domestically made product here again in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to circle back to that. The first thing I want to ask then, or the next thing I want to ask is, tell us your story. How did you get into the steel business? I think people are going to be very interested in hearing this.
Well, it goes back a long ways now. I mean, I've been in business now for, I think, 29 years this year. I started, I really started long before that. My family had been in the business since the early 60s, mid 60s. And, I grew up in it. My father had a little PBF shop, and he used to go in and count inventory and stack fittings, and I learned how to drive on a forklift. So, and most of it was putting pipes and racks and stuff and loading trucks. And, as a young man, as going through high school, I tried everything in my power to avoid doing what my father does, because that's what most young men do. I tried to go do some things, I like vehicle cars, so I became a mechanic for a short period of time, and opened a speed shop, and just right in that generation, but ended up partying a little too much and not paying attention to business, and made some critical mistakes, and ended up having to step away from it. And my father offered to bring me back into the industry again, and he took my business partner at the time from there as well, and brought him over, gave him a job as well, and got back in the business, and started in the warehouse and receiving, and went into shipping, and got into the office, inside sales, outside sales, purchasing, got into management, and then I kind of grew out of there. And I was there that was probably the first 10 years of my career I spent with that one company. Learned a little bit of things, but this was started back before we really had emails. And this was everybody line up in the morning to get on the fax machine to set all their faxes overseas, and hope that you receive that fax in the morning answer back instead of looking for emails. So, we used to remember everybody's phone number. There wasn't speed dials and stuff like that back then. So it was a different time. And but as time's gone on, we've learned the different ways, and I grew out of that company, and I decided I needed to step away from it, because it was getting to the point where I couldn't advance any further, because my father would have been the next position to take over. So I ended up stepping away, moving to a different company, and started there. I kind of specialized in the stainless steels and the alloy steels at the time, and went to a stainless and alloy company. And I worked there for a few months to help them work on getting a big project, and then it got a little boring for me, because I kind of got sitting there as inside sales, and I went from one place where it was you had to kind of do everything yourself to another place where everybody did everything for you. So being a busy mind and a busy thinker, and now we have the internet, and I ended up finding some overseas manufacturers of steel pipe, and started communicating with them, and kind of learned the import business a little bit for importing steel pipe, but never really thought about the freights and all that kind of stuff from overseas at that point. And got a bit of a crash course, didn't realize that there was some good money to be made at it. And I went and talked to my boss at the time and said, I think we could maybe sell this stuff and do this if you're interested. And he didn't want anything to do with carbon steel because they're a stainless steel company. So I had after some discussions with my wife, and we had a brand new baby at home, and and it was just the two of us. She wasn't working, and it was like, do we take this gamble? And she says, well, can you make money in 90 days or more or less? And I said, I think so. And she said, well, if you can't, then can you get another job? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that I could find somebody to hire me because there's not a lot of steel pipe guys around. And she said, well, I said, go for it. What's worse? It's going to have a little bit of credit card debt. Go for it. Give it a shot. So I think on my 85th day, I got paid my first payment. I made a little over double what I did the previous year for the whole year. And that was in the first 3 months that I started. And immediately we went to the second order, the third order, and the fourth order. So all of a sudden I went from making, a very small salary at the time to making about 8-9 times as much in a year. And it was really kind of life-changing, a little bit startling. So, but I ended up spending a lot of time up at night because most of my dealings was with China at the time, and I was importing a lot from China.
Okay.
So they worked throughout the night, and you can't, at the time, you couldn't just email them because they wouldn't respond or give you all the information. So I discovered, I think it was called a MSN Messenger. Remember those?
Wow. Yes. God, I forgot about that. Yes.
So all the guys over there used to have MSN Messenger accounts, and I found that the guys can type fairly good English. He couldn't speak very good English, so I'd have like 6 or 7 conversations going, and I'd work throughout the night, sleeping in the morning till about 9 or 10. And then I would take my daughter, my new baby, I'd take her to swimming lessons or whatever, and then maybe the customer I had here, a couple customers I had here, I'd see them every once in a while in the afternoon, and then I'd go to work after dinner and just get down in my little basement hole and do it all over again. And so it was a bit of a grind. It was a lot of work in the beginning, a lot of time spent on the computer, and but I learned a lot, and made some really good contacts and some good friends too over there, and I ended up meeting my first employee that way. I had a guy that was he just said to me when I said, "Can I just call you on the phone?" And do you speak English? Because I don't speak Chinese. And he's like, "Yeah, I speak English." And he had a degree in foreign trade, and he also was specialized in steel tube mills, for most of his career. So he picked up the phone and called me, and he spoke like I was talking, like we're talking right now, and I could understand it clearly. And prior to that, I had a couple of interpreters come with me when I go to see the mills, just to try to communicate my concerns. And one thing I found out with the Chinese language is if the interpreter doesn't understand the point of what you're trying to get across, it's not really word for word. It's more of a explanation when they're trying to explain it. Okay. So I've had people come with me that are like prime Chinese speaking individuals that could not get the point across I was trying to get across. So this guy became super invaluable to us immediately, and it changed our business at that point on the trading side. So at that point, I had a guy in China be on the ground here. Then I started to advance my business forward, started getting a couple more customers, brought in some other agencies down in the States here, started trading with some guys in the US, and we blew the thing up quite quickly. I went from, I think the first year I did about $5.5 million in sales. The second year I did, I think, 11, and then I went up to 28, and then I went up to 45, and my first customer was my dad's company that he was running at the time, and he had no idea that I was selling to him, because I was using a friend of mine as almost like a proxy stand-in, because I didn't want anything to be a conflict for him.
Appreciate that.
So it was really fun because he had no idea how I was making a living. And we went out to dinner one night, and he's like, son, he says, if you want to because I was in cars before that, and he says, if you want to get into I don't know, importing car wheels or something like that, he says, I'd help you out, and I give you an investment for that. And I said, well, yeah, what about pipe, right? Why don't we do some with pipe? I mean, that's what you know. He says, and my dad's been in business a long time, but he was kind of disconnected a little bit from part of it because he's been in management for so long. He's like, I don't know. So he says, steel pipe, he says, trust me, there's no money to be made in it. There's just no money to be made in it. And I said, well, let me tell you a story. And so I started telling the story, and his jaw's kind of hitting the floor. But it was really kind of cool because he was about my age then. And he was getting to that age where it was like, stress was kicking in, and I was getting concerned a little bit about his health. And, I had a young daughter, and I wanted to have a granddad for a long time. So I said, you know what, Dad? I said, I'm making a lot of money here now. I said, I don't need all this money. I said, why don't we just split it, right? I said, then we'll just split the company. You take half, I'll take half. We'll work at it together, right? And, I said, take as much time as you need. He had a little acre. I said, take as much time as you need to get your head clear and your health feeling good, and then when you're ready to start work. And he said, well, I got to wait for my bonus to come at the end of the year. And he asked me what his bonus would be, and it's like 30-some thousand. So I wrote him a check. And I said, here. Wow. So there's your bonus. I said, I don't want you to get stressed anymore. I don't want you to be in that kind of stress load. So I want a grandfather for my kids long term here. And that's kind of how he got back involved in the business. And he spent about 4 months kind of getting himself in really kind of in that good mental space. And then he needed to get back to work. And, we went, I brought him in, and it was like immediately he was, being dad, wanted to come in and take things over because, now he needed to, because he's an experienced guy. And so we had a little struggle probably about the first 4 or 5 months. And then I think he realized that, okay, I can trust, he's got it under control, And I was like, it was like almost like this light went off, and we became very good partners at that point. And, we ended up setting up a distribution, at the time, there wasn't all these outlets to go import from China. Like, not everybody could do it. You had to really know what you're doing. So we were trading product, but we had a lot of other places where we could trade to that didn't have the distribution facilities that they needed at the time. So we had this concept idea of, here, we'll bring in material with you. We'll keep a little bit extra to back you up, and then you can buy with us on a quarterly basis, and we'll trade for you. And we started that, and it went, like I said, it went 4 or 5 million in the first year. Then it went up to like 12, 13, then I went up to 25 or 30. And then I think it was close to 60 million. And it got to the point where we couldn't take any more business. And this was in 2008.
Okay.
Just before they hit the fan at the financial markets in September, Lehman Brothers and stuff. So it got to the point where we were going, it's $1 million PO, making 20%. Do we want to take it? Or do we want to wait a couple hours to see what else comes in? It was daily like that at that point. I know today it's not quite like that anymore, but it was like that at the time. And we couldn't finance anymore. So we had a group that my father went out and played some golf with. This guy who was the CEO of this company called Bri-Steel Corporation, and they were looking for acquisitions. He liked the story and thought it would be a good one for the public company to have. So he came in on August 1st and sat with us, and we told him what we thought the value was. We tried to be fair about it, and he agreed to it and said, no problem, and let's close in 30 days. And it was like the intent letter was about the 5th or 6th of August, and then we closed it on like 5th or 6th of September. And I think about 2 days later, that's when Lehman Brothers filed Chapter 11, that housing market financial crash, and then steel dropped like 30% overnight. And the crazy part was the first month, because like he would say to me, how much business can you forecast you can do? And I said, well, how much money you got, right? How much money do you have access to? Because I can get you more business than you have money. I can promise you that. And he said, well, you get as much money or business as you can get. He says, we're publicly traded. We can get all this money. So, okay. So during the month of August, we ended up accumulating, I think, close to 40 million in backlog in the first month.
This is
on trading orders. We just took everything that we can get. And it was good decent margins too. And then, of course, after the crash, everything started to fall apart. People customers started canceling stuff. Some took it, but some of them started canceling it. And and then the Pubco CEO, he's like, well, we just got to say, screw it, they got to cancel it too. And he wanted to tell all our vendors to go pound. And I said, look, they bought all this material, they got it all being made, right? So we got to figure out another solution for this. If we tell them to go away, we're not going to have a company, right?
Right.
And so fortunately for him, I had really long, deep relationships with these people. And we sat down and we ended up making a consignment arrangement where they really controlled the pricing going forward there. And we ended up having our largest year ever in 2009 when everybody was crashing because we had all this inventory. It was all at the right price, right? So it kind of got us through. We ended up paying everybody all their money off before the end of 2009. 1 year, it all got looked after and unwound, right? And then it kind of we became we were doing okay for a couple more years, and then it was like all these anti-dumping cases started kicking in, and they were kind of sequentially getting knocked out of the market. The Chinese were. So at the time, before we became Bri-Steel, we were called Weifang Steel Canada, and that's another story why I use that name, and I'll tell you that in a sec. But once China started getting dumped in Canada, we started looking for other vendors outside of China, and we had this Chinese sounding names. We're like, I don't understand what's going on here. So we couldn't get a lot of traction with it. So at that point, we rebranded ourselves to Bri-Steel Corporation. And to kind of go with the corporate, Bri-Chem style, right? And so that's the kind of evolution how Bri-Steel became. And it started like off as a trading stockist. And then after all these guys got dumped out of there, I was over there visiting one of our vendors, and I saw this technology. It's called thermal pipe expansion. And it's a large diameter seamless pipe. And I'm always, I got concerns about the high speed, high volume manufacturing that everybody tries to achieve. You want the biggest mills that do the biggest capacities, and I think that comes with the biggest risks and the biggest problems. And I've always been the guy that likes to come in, well, everybody's fighting over that big nut of all those things, to come and take that low hanging fruit over here. But I have to do it in a way that's sustainable and flexible enough that we could survive a downtime fairly easily, right? And so this mill is pretty ideal. The footprint wasn't huge. The technology was sound. It's been proven. It was proven for years at that point. It's actually Chinese IP. It was patented by them a bunch of years ago. And so I said to him, I think we could make this in North America, right? So why don't we build one in North America? Initially, I wanted him to build it in the U.S., but he had family in Canada, so he thought, well, let's build it in Canada first. I said, okay, we'll build one in Canada. So we decided to set it up, but everybody thought I was an insane lunatic saying I was going to build a large diameter seamless pipe mill. We got it together, and there was a lot. It was the first one we ever built. We learned a lot from it. We made a lot of little efficiency errors, where there was a lot of conversations afterwards where, man, if I would have known that now, I would have done this different. But it's kind of past that point where we're just pumping it out. And, so we just built this factory and set it up and got it going. And the public company kind of used it a bit as a scapegoat, I think, in the first couple of years, because it was partially owned by the Chinese partner. He owned 25% of it. And this was the only business that was not part of that public company. So I think we became kind of like the scapegoat for, admin fees and all this kind of stuff. And they kind of used and abused them a little bit. So losses were beginning to pile up, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And it got to the point where, he said, I drove into work one morning and I looked down at my stock ticker to see how my shares were doing. And there was a press release saying that Bri-Chem's going to divest its tubular business. And I was president of the tubular business. Haven't heard nothing about it.
Okay.
I learned it on my iPhone, right? So I'm like, well, what's this about? So I was coming up to my 5-year contract. So I agreed to stay for 5 years to help him run it. And I was probably going to leave because it was just not working out. And but then when I saw that, I thought, well, let me give it a go and see what they can find and see if I can find that right owner, or maybe I can come in and buy it. So I went and tried to buy it back from him. He wouldn't sell it to me. Said, he just thought it was just a bad idea, because I think he really truly thought it was a loser the way it was. And but it was just a accumulation of bad bookkeeping decisions, I think, by the accounting group that was there. And so anyways, we ended up finding this guy came up from Houston, and older gentleman, his 80s, I think he was maybe 70, late 70s at the time. And he sat down across from me and he said, I'll never forget it, he said, I bet they got you wasting your time doing a bunch of spreadsheets and budgets and bullshit. And he says, you know how I budget? He says, I do the most we can this month. And he says, the next month I try to do better. And if something blows up in the world, we'll probably have a really good year. And he said, I believe that budgeting leads to poor decision making at the end of the month. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty good. I like that. He said, I want to build this into a monster. He says, I'm just, I've always wanted to own a mill. And I thought, okay, I'm going to stay here for this guy. And let's give it a go. So I decided to stick around. And the first 6 months, we were, $2 million in the positive. Just like that, boom, everything was going positive. And, and then it was next year we did another couple million. And then it was the next year after that, we had, it was getting close to election time. It seems like it's close to election time, the industry slows down for some reason.
Okay.
But, it's, so it started slowing down a little bit, and I can foresee a lot of these things about to happen. And, and he's a very strategic guy, but he's not a long-term strategic guy. He can't grasp when I say, hey, you know what? I've already, we're building a plant here, and I'm already thinking about the next one, what we're going to do.
He's looking right in front of notes, but
yeah, I'm thinking about when's the next downturn going to be, following the commodities, taking a look at different, the dock union guys, when does their contracts up, these kind of things. So I'm trying to always think way out in the future. Okay. So and I wanted to make a few strategic moves, and he wasn't ready to do that at that point. We ended up hurting us a little bit. And then he decided he wanted to come in and take over, and we ended up losing money for a year. And it was really hard to watch because I'd already gone through all these decisions that they were trying to learn. And, it's hard when you're a young guy and you're trying to tell a 78-year-old guy that, no, you're wrong. You've been in the business for 50 years, but no, you're wrong about this because I've already done it. That doesn't work. And so it makes for touchy conversations. But, after, but his heart's always in the right place. He's a good man, he's a good man. And, and so time went on, we got to the end of the year, and he said, I don't care, just do what you need to do to make money again. So it took about 3-4 months to get the buying cycles back and get everything kind of on track. And next year we made money, and then we made money again. And then we had one of the big guys try to target us on an anti-dumping case because our raw material was coming from China. And they tried to lump us into our raw material being as, it was so dumb. And anyway, so I had to become an expert of anti-dumping and countervailing duty cases almost overnight. Ended up going out to Ottawa and sitting down at their little tribunal meetings. Got grilled, and I think everybody understood, but I ended up getting them to reverse their thinking, and we ended up getting our exclusion for our raw material out of it, which worked to our favor a little bit, because it took the finished pipes from China out of the market, but not the raw material. So that helped us and gave us a little bit more access to the Canadian market. And so at that point, it was we started getting a little busier again, and then of course, then Trump came into office and 232 kicked in, and everybody panicked. How can they afford it? And it was the right idea, I believe, but I think it was executed probably the wrong way, because the point of it was to get the pricing competitive in the market here in the United States, and not to punish the guys that have been respectful to the market in the United States. Like we've never been our Canadian mill would never be a price threat to a U.S. deal, right? But when you just blanketly say 25% of the price, well, that's 25% of a high price versus 25% of $1,000 a ton price. You have so we're getting penalized a lot more. So I spent a lot of time talking with the Department of Finance in Canada while they were going through their negotiations. They used to ask me questions. Like the whole finance ministry used to call me all the time and ask me about different steel things. Just, what do I do about this? Is this okay to add an agreement? And so I got really entrenched in the Canadian government discussions there for a while. And then, of course, it ended up actually turning out to our benefit, surprisingly. Our business stalled for a bit. We've ended up paying a lot in tariffs to the U.S. government, but we did find that the willingness from a lot of other countries to, because they all felt they needed to eat those tariffs and not just pass them through, because some of them would eat them, and then it's like, well, we can't compete with that. They just kind of moved out a little bit. So it ended up working out to our favor in a way, and business started to come back, and also, we started looking for other opportunities for our product. And we started getting approved at more end users, and things were just starting to happen, starting to get some momentum behind it. And then, of course, we hit COVID, and the whole world stops, right? And and fortunately for us, we have this factory that we can slow down to a crawl without killing it and limp through the whole scenario. So we stayed on 2 shifts right through 2019 going into early 2020 before we actually had to lay off one shift and go to a single shift again. And it was interesting because we ended up building some inventory, but we had material coming, so I said, let's just build it all. There's no point in leaving it as raw material, right? Let's build it what we can. Went down to 1 shift, and so we started, but that inventory saved us next year because we ended up making money in 2020. We ended up making money in 2021. And then it was U.S. Steel drops out, right? So now there's our through 24-inch manufacturer competitor domestically, and we had a couple mills in Korea disappear. They called us, want us to sell us their equipment. It was interesting because I started looking at their layouts, and I went, I understand why you're out of business now, just from the way you had this thing laid out. And then it went, Valorec exited all the pipe business in Europe now, manufacturing. So they shut down all their plants there. So that's like 3 major competitors. Now we got Tenaris still remaining there, but I mean, even the Eastern European guys that were kind of creep in once in a while, the cost of energy over there that they're going through, it's just, you put us in a really optimal spot to, go in and take that extra share of the market that we didn't have. And we started in early 22, we got this wave of support because all the stockists that were stocking U.S. Steel product ran out of stock. They were buying, our next step was Valorec, which to me makes sense because they're the guys that started the whole process, invented the process of seamless pipe, one of the oldest mills in the world. Why not, right? That makes sense. And then they disappeared. And then it's like, okay, well, everybody buys from Tenaris, so who else is out there that would make sense? Well, let's talk to Neil, right? So I all of a sudden had all this wave of support come in early 22, and we got booked out 6 months like that at decent money. And I went to our owner, I said, let's keep a close eye on this, because this continues to sustain like this. We need to talk about getting some more capacity, because I can't be 6 months out. I said, our whole business model was an 8 to 10 week turnaround, right? So 6 months out, it just puts us in with all the bottom figures in pricing. You know, I could always say I could do it faster, so you pay a little bit more, right? And so we watched, and every month we were booking it, backfilling it, booking it, backfilling it, and it went for over a year, like close to a year like that. And it was like, gee, hold on, that wouldn't have been 22, that would have been 21. Yeah, that would have been 21. So going into 22, I said we need to find another place, right? We need to expand off of this. And in Canada, the facility we have was just leased, and to get more power would have been multi millions of dollars to get more power, to be able to put in more equipment. We didn't have a lot extra space there to be able to do it. So we started looking at some other alternatives. You know, our owner would like to put it in Houston. He said, but I said, you know, I didn't want to be in my customers necessarily direct backyard, because, you know, it took a while in Edmonton to get the stockists up there to support us, because we were a little bit of a threat to them, right? And so I started looking at the states surrounding it, and I ended up running across this place here in Oklahoma, in this smallish town called Enid. And I've never heard of it. And you know what? Since we put in here, I've met so many people from here. Like I live in Oklahoma City, and I run into people all the time, and they're like, yeah, I'm from Enid, or I got family in Enid, or I grew up in Enid. You know, everybody seems to have come from here in Oklahoma at some point. And wow, what I tell you, the facility we got's got 20 times the power that we have in Edmonton. It's 3 times the size. It's got cranes and infrastructure, and it cost us probably about as much as what a power upgrade would have cost in a rented building in Edmonton. So
it's got a whole new building and a whole double the capacity.
And 46 acres of land here. So yeah, so it seemed like a real no-brainer, you know. And I brought our owner up. He wasn't sure at first, and I said, well, look, come up and take a look. You need to see it with your own eyes. And you know, the pictures look like it was out in the country somewhere where nobody's around, but it's actually about 4 blocks from City Hall here in a town that's got 50-some thousand people. So it's not very far from everything, and it's right in.
How big is the plant?
330,000 square feet.
Like a small city. Holy cow!
Yeah, it's huge in here. We're not going to use a third of the space, you know, when we set up our first mill in here. But the beauty is, like I said, is if we want to do another one down the road, or when we do the next one and the next one, we already have the space, we already have the infrastructure to support it, right? You know, then we can utilize some existing staff to share between the 2 operations. We don't have to be double staffed for labs and all this kind of stuff. So it'll be a long-term vision, but you can see what's going on. And he came out, and it was really interesting. He walked in here with his wife, and he walked around, and he's like, he just saw it right away. Like, you could tell as soon as he walked in, he was excited. Let's do this. Yeah, this is a no-brainer. Gotta get this stuff. You know, Oklahoma has been great. The people in the state have been great. They're well open for business here. You know, the power is cheap here compared to, oh my God, it's a fraction of the cost it is in Edmonton. And I think it's like the second to the bottom cheapest flat rate pricing in the United States. I think it's one of the second of the cheapest places to get power. So, and it's abundant, lots of it. So, lots of good incentive programs, and, just good support. So they're very business friendly state, you know. So it became a no-brainer, and we decided we were going to get going at it. Bought the building, bought some equipment. I moved my family down here, and now we're living in Oklahoma. Don't miss the Edmonton winters.
I bet you don't. Yeah.
Now we're set up the plant. Should be. We got our first couple pieces of equipment in here about 2 weeks ago, and we got some more coming in a couple weeks. And now it's going to be through the month of October is when the bulk it's going to start arriving. November we'll be doing a lot of the installing. Going into December we'll be starting. I'm hoping to be able to do a couple trial pieces in December, because I made it a mission of mine to build a piece of pipe here before the end of the year. So we're going to try to get a piece of pipe done here before the end of the year. Whether we'll be able to do the whole process by the end of the year, I don't know, but we'll be able to make a pipe. So that's going to be the goal. And we'll be going into Q1, you know, looking pretty strong. I think probably by the end of Q1 we'll be up to pretty good speed. So
you mentioned, by the way, incredibly, that's a cool story. That's an inspiring story, and congratulations on the success, and hopefully this keeps going. That's crazy. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I think anybody listening ought to be able to be like, check this out. Look what you can do too by being creative. But I love it. You mentioned something really cool. That is, this is the, did you say the only mill in the world that's going to be capable of producing this particular size product?
This will be the only mill ever in the U.S. history that can do above 26-inch seamless.
Okay, and why has that always been like a standard size to never go beyond that size? And is there some reason the mills never went that big?
Traditionally, the engineers used to use welded pipes for that, but because a lot of those applications, it'll be more in the transmission lines or moving product around, and just welded's just traditionally is a cheaper product. But what's happened over the years is as pressure's got up, when you shut off valves at pumping stations, you get all these fluids coming through a 30-inch pipe, crashing into it, pressures build, and that's where you get bursts, and bursts happen on the weld seams. So going through, like on the pipeline, we're going through some of those critical spaces, like through rivers or conservation areas and stuff like that. Seamless is a much more desirable product if you can get it. Now, nobody really knew where to get it because traditionally it's a very difficult thing, because if you try to hot roll a 30 or 36-inch seamless pipe, the traditional way, to keep it round would be almost impossible. It'd be like, so this process is slow enough, and it's cool, and it holds the shape long enough that it cools down enough to keep the shape before it comes off the end of the mandrel. And it's kind of an ingenious idea, the way it is. So the guys that made the bigger sizes, the 30s and 36, the Valorec in Germany used to make the big 30s and 36. There's a company here called Wyman Gordon. I think they make 30-inch or something like that. But they're, really heavy, thick walls because they're extrusion mills. So they tried to make what we make, the thin stuff, which is more commonly used in the piping world. It would just turn to mush when they think of it. There's like a giant Play-Doh fun factory of steel, basically, right?
So so in a lot of ways, what you're creating, if I hear you right, is also good for the environment as stuff flows through the rivers, through the conversation areas. It's got much less of a chance of it going kaboom. And having
they use our product. It'd be safer for everything, for sure. Yeah, in those applications, yeah. And it's also electric power. We don't have big gas furnaces heating up the steel, so we're not burning a lot of fossil fuels, that kind of stuff here. It's just strictly turn it on, and the energy is being applied directly to the steel. When you're done, you turn it off. So like a traditional big rolling mill, once you start the furnace, you can't really turn it off. And if you got no business, it still runs. Otherwise, you shut it off, you start breaking it, and you got major maintenance issues, right? And these are some of those. Remember, I said there's a bevy of problems of why a company like U.S. Steel Lorraine didn't stick around forever. High-speed production. This is a market that, I estimate probably in Canada, U.S., and Mexico is probably about 150,000 tons a year, 160,000 tons, which is not, in the scope of steel pipe, is not a huge amount. Like you're talking millions of tons of the smaller sizes, right? So when you do a hot rolling traditional mill, the traditional manufacturing of it, it has to go and continue at a certain speed. If you shut it down, you get all sorts of issues and wear. You got to retool, and it's very costly, and you have fatigue and all this kind of stuff. So it's got to keep moving. And those mills, at the speed they move, will produce probably double what the whole capacity, like the whole market capacity is here. So, it's almost like you need like one or two in the world, and that's it. That's going to supply the whole market, right? And that's where this is kind of a more interesting process, because we could take a smaller hot rolling mill that makes the smaller sizes, so the hot rollers can fill it up with the smaller sizes, and then on the higher end stuff, we can use some of those higher end hollows to be able to make our pipes by the expansion process. So we can slow the production down or scale it by adding enough equipment to be able to manage whatever we need by just adding a few pieces of equipment. So, yeah, it's a really nice, flexible, smart process to be able to make pipe, especially for this kind of pipe. Anyways, I wouldn't do it on small stuff, but this pipe for sure.
Do you sense now? You've been in the business like I have for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like you're similar story in that we both kind of grew up a bit in the industry. So we sort of organically wanted to be in the industry, if you will, or at least we had an incentive to be in it. I'm wondering from your perspective now, because I know obviously you've run now different facilities in different locations. In terms of where you are now, has it been harder to bring in, let's call it the younger generation? I've heard that from different people, that it seems like it's a bit of a challenge, that it's like our business is, sexy is the wrong word, but it's like, you and I know this is a legitimate business. It's a legitimate way to make a living. It's interesting. It's fun. You have to use your head. And I'm wondering, are you having any issues at all attracting that sort of younger generation, or what is that? What has been your experience with that?
Well, kind of our demographic of employees are between 25 to 45 kind of range. And, a lot of them are young families, right? That have kids at home, and they want to be home on weekends. Because what we decided to do, because we were in a market in Edmonton where you have the big oil companies up in Fort McMurray, that when it picks up, they come in, they poach all the good tradespeople and all the people out of there as fast as they can and offer them really high salaries, but it's usually small periods of time. They got to live out at site. So when we get to 24-hour production, instead of doing 5/8 and 3 shifts, we ended up going 4 days a week, and we go 2 shifts, and we ran 12 hours a day. So the guys got 48 hours of pay a week, and they got 8 hours of that was overtime, and they got long weekends every weekend. So it was really, and they didn't have to go out of town. So, and good benefit plan. It was really attractive to those guys that had the young family. So it's a it wasn't my first choice to be in this industry. Of course, you always, like I said, you always try to do the opposite of what your father does. But once you get into it, I always tell young people when they talk about, because there seems to be this desire to have their dream job, or have their dream home, their forever home, they'll say, or something like that. It's like, no, you're going to live in about 5 or 6 places before you land in a home that you're probably going to live into your senior years, and and you should probably have about a dozen jobs by then, right? But starting a business, because when you want to be an entrepreneur, you can't. It's hard to just jump into something you know nothing about. It's almost a recipe for disaster. So I tell people, when the kids, when they talk about it, I say, you got to separate your playtime from your work time, right? Go to whoever's going to pay you the most money during work time, okay, and start there. And if you like it, stick with it, right? Learn it. If you don't like it, find another job, but don't leave that once you get another job, right? Then that way at the end of the workday, you got time to play with your friends and money to do it. But if you like it, stick with it, and you'll learn to love it, and it'll become almost like your life. And then if you're entrepreneurial spirit, you'll look at it and you'll come up with a concept or an angle to use what you've learned, the contacts you've made. You'll almost have this built-in book of business there, an understanding of that business, where you can go, oh, I can go do this and maybe reinvent how things are done by doing it this way. And that's probably your most surefire way to success as an entrepreneur. It takes a lot of work and hard work, but there's no doing it from scratch. If I wanted to go in and sell, I don't know, medical supplies, I have no idea how to do that. I don't know who to call or who to talk to about it. It would take a ton of work to be able to do something like that. I don't disagree. If it was stuff that I sell here or my customers would sell that I know about, maybe I could morph into that kind of business, right? But with some ounce of success. But there is a generational gap right now. I think it's probably around the 18, 20-year-olds right now, where they're all looking for that dream job. But I'm seeing the younger generation in the 14 to 16-year-old range, where they're kind of looking at life a little differently. And I'm starting to see that switch. I got a daughter who's just about turned 21, and the last couple of years she's been, she was in that zone, very thick and very creatively, but always looking for that big deal, and which I love, because it tells me that she's an entrepreneur. But now she's starting to look at, with all the interest rates going up, interest rates are this is going to affect me this way, and we've got to think about this and do this. So she's starting to think like she's really an adult now, which is really exciting for me. But the younger generation, I'm starting to see with the kids. I got a 16-year-old too at home that they look at it a little differently, and they're more about let's just start working hard and get a job and start from the ground up and go. So I think it'll come around.
It's actually interesting. I teach a class at a high school, and I was teaching them actually this week, and it was in financial literacy. And so I asked these 18-year-olds things about budgets and just information. And I was actually fairly shocked and fairly impressed how much and how aware of things they were. And it kind of gave me a sense of hope that, okay, they're not just all staring at TikTok. They're actually aware. And I was throwing concepts and numbers and assets and they got it. And they were able to reply back to me. And so based on what you just said, that absolutely dovetails with what I've seen, which is maybe they're becoming very aware that it isn't, all internet sensation, make up $1 billion and drive your Ferrari. Maybe there's actually, I actually have to get a job and pay bills and live here, and there's a process. We've all been telling you that for 30 years, but yeah, maybe that's a positive.
The TikToks and those things that they came out with, there was a lot of influencers coming out with these side hustles. Hey, you want to make $5,000 a month and not only work for 3 hours a week, right? I do this and I do that. Sign up here, and the young impressionable people that look at it, they'll think, wow, like that, yeah, I'd like that, right? I want to learn more, right?
Right, of course.
And then over time, they realize it's bullshit, and they're just doing it to get clicks and likes and get views, and then they realize, eventually, they realize it's just a bunch of garbage. And I think that's where because it went for a while. That was the word of the week, was side hustle. From a lot of the young people that I knew at the time. So now they've kind of gotten past that, and they're like, yeah, now we're just looking for jobs. So
I love it. You made a really cool post. I hope you don't mind me asking you about it.
Sure.
Just a couple of days ago on 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just as dumb as it sounds. I'm just curious what motivated you to do that. I hope you don't mind me asking. But it was cool that I really thought it was a cool post.
Well, I know I'm Canadian, right? And I still remember the day when it happened. I was working in Vancouver at the time at a distribution company there early in my career. And it was, I just listened to this morning show where these comedian kind of guys were chatting. They're really funny. And they went to this live thing about this. And I thought at first maybe it was just another War of the Worlds kind of attempt, And I thought these guys were trying to be funny. And when I got to the office, then people started talking about it. And I was like, it was a pretty big, pretty monumental thing. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of families lost people, and and it's something that doesn't happen here, very often in history, right? So, foreign terrorists coming here doing stuff like that to that scale. I mean, we've had lots try to do smaller stuff, but that was a pretty monumental one, and I got a lot of respect for the people that went in there and tried to help people, and if I would have been down there, I probably would have been in there helping them out and trying my best to do what I could do to help too. And I got lots of friends in the military or ex-military people and first responders, and I thought, well, first thing I did when I bought this place down here, got this place down here, is I said I had this flag pull outside. I said I got to get a big American flag now. I got to fly the American flag proud. This is the United States, and I drove in that morning and I went, I said, I think I better put that flag down to half mast today. Posted. So I dropped her down to half mast, and I got in and took that picture and just wanted to, just pay my respects to the people and the families that died that day. And,
love it.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Like I said, I saw, it's interesting. I was just in New York a couple of days ago, and just the day after 9/11, and I've been down to the memorial. I've been down to the pools. I've seen. We took our kids there. And it's regardless of where you're from, it's again, my kids weren't even born at the time, and so to show it to them, my parents are talking about where they were when Kennedy, or
right.
Cuba or whatever, and I remember exactly. Everybody remembers where they were on that day.
Right. Yeah, I remember 9/11 and the space shuttle Challenger blowing up.
Yes.
Those were like two big deals. those big moments that you remember. And for people that haven't been to New York to see that monument, it's pretty moving and it's pretty amazing when you consider the size of those towers and how they came down and that space that they're in, that those buildings around it didn't get destroyed along with it. Like, it's such a small physical area for such a large thing to happen. It's just really sad. And and just gotta keep that over somewhere else. Keep it out of our yard, and everybody just gotta try to start to learn to get along and
amen.
Get over things, man.
Amen. This has been, I honestly, a very cool interview. I learned a hell of a lot from you. I learned more about seamless pipe than I've ever known. And actually, I would love to get down there and watch some of that stuff run. What a cool! I've been to the old steel mills, in Gary, and I've watched those great big, and I've seen the new cores. I've seen how those ones, but watching a pipe mill would be pretty cool. Yeah,
I mean, you can see our process on YouTube. We got some videos up there that you can check it out. Search for Bri-Steel on there, you'll find some video of it. But if you're ever in Oklahoma, want to come by, just reach out, and I'll be happy to take you through. I love showing people it.
God bless. Thank you so much for agreeing.
My pleasure.
I'm going to do my little outro. I'll hit the record and then hang on a second. I end everything like this, so everybody knows who's watching. This is very human and very live. So thank you.
Yep.
My name is Lew Dennen again. Thank you for watching EOXS Stories on Steel. If you would be interested ever in being a guest, please reach out to me, and I'd love to have you on the show. So anyway, thank you again to Neil Rasmussen.
You got it.
Excellent. And if you're interested in seamless pipe, he is your guy. Check it out. Thanks very much. We'll see you on the next one.